You're very welcome back. Well, I'm joined now in studio by Senator and Sinn Féin MEP candidate for the Ireland South European elections, Paul Gavin, and by editor of Travel Extra, Owen Corrie. And joining us down the line is Saibh O'Neill, Senior Climate Advisor with Friends of the Earth. I want to come to you first, Owen, because we just spoke to Minister Eamon Ryan there, and he said he is not intervening when it comes to the lifting of this cap. It is a matter for An Bord Pleanála and An Bord Pleanála only.
It's a buck passing on a massive scale. We're parking something that impacts a national asset, something very important for our economy, in a process by the time it's been through Fingal and Bord Pleanála and the court appeals inevitably could take 4 years. In that meantime, we're going to be losing ground.
Okay, but he said the last thing we want are ministers or politicians in this country interfering with planning decisions. We know where that got us in the past.
Planning decisions for major national assets are usually fast-tracked or given some sort of impetus outside of this, going to the local authority, going to Bord Pleanála. An example would be the seaport of Dublin. Anything that will tie Dublin Airport's expansion plans up in red tape seems to be suiting some people at the moment.
Suiting who?
There's, as I say, buck passing on a massive scale. There are a lot of different things have got involved in an issue which was imposed in 2006, a planning cap of 32 million passengers based on the M50. There were 2 lanes on the M50. There was a barrier that went up and down for every €2 that went in.
Yeah, and they were concerned that they wouldn't be able to deal with that volume of traffic, and they say now they can.
Itself. The M50 is no longer as big an issue for reasons that it's a bigger road, there's no barrier, and more people are using public transport. But a lot of other fraud has got involved in this debate, which is solely about ground transport, access to Dublin Airport. We've seen things like noise, flight paths, emissions, anti-globalisation, anti-immigration, people wanting Cork and Shannon to get part of it, people wanting Belfast. All of that has got involved in a debate which was about the M50. It's time somebody stepped in and said, let's clear this 32 million passenger cap, and let's allow Dublin Airport to grow, because by stopping Dublin Airport growing, we're stopping our economy growing.
OK, Saibh O'Neill, we're stopping the economy growing here, and we're allowing all these other issues, including immigration and emissions, to complicate and muddy the waters here, and we shouldn't.
I understand the point Owen is making, but flying has an enormous climate impact, and airports and airlines need to do their part to get us all to net zero. And unfortunately, the signs are that the emissions are growing from this sector. And in Ireland alone, we have demand growth of about 3.5% to 4% per annum. So if that continued, we'd burst through all of our targets, and it would grow very substantially by 2030, 2040, 2050. So the challenge for the aviation sector is that there is no quick technological fix that's cheap. Both sustainable aviation fuels and e-fuels are extremely expensive. They're not available at the moment. It's difficult to scale them up in a way that wouldn't have negative impacts on land use and biodiversity. And of course, batteries are far too heavy to put in aircraft, at least at the moment anyway. Okay. So you're really looking at demand management measures, and that's where airports come in. It's by maintaining the capacity that we have at our existing airports and managing the travel patterns that we do have. And by encouraging less business travel, the use of technologies like Zoom and Skype and so on for business meetings, and by making alternative travel by sail rail more affordable, more accessible for some of those journeys.
Okay,
obviously, as an island,
just to go, I suppose,
very important.
And it is, but just to go to the comments made by Ryanair and indeed Aer Lingus and other airlines, the impact this is going to have on your ordinary consumer in Ireland is prices are going to go through the roof. A €500 we're looking at for flights from London to Dublin this Christmas, according to Ryanair. So the consumer is actually the one who's punished the most.
Demand and supply together set the price for air travel. And obviously, with Ryanair flights, on some days a flight can be €10 and the next day it can be €100, even on the same day. You can have vastly different price ranges. So they set the prices.
There is supply. Oh, and that's the point you're making.
I might just make one point, though, about taxes generally on air travel. We don't have any excise duty or VAT or carbon taxes on aviation fuel. So we're not paying the full ecological price for aviation. They are far too cheap, and unfortunately that does incentivize a demand. So if we're serious about managing If we are serious about managing climate change, we have to include the aviation in our carbon budgets. And that means we need policies that actually set a cap on aviation emissions, just like every other sector.
OK, to bring you in, Paul Gavin, lift the cap, don't lift the cap. What's your position?
My position is this. I get really frustrated when I hear talk about the cap in Dublin Airport, because I live in Limerick. And what we have in Shannon and indeed in Cork are airports that are hugely underutilised, while we have Dublin Airport that is choked to the brim.
Well, so, it's not that they're choked to the brim, they have a cap.
Well,
and they said they need to lift the cap, and they could manage that cap being lifted.
I have to travel through Dublin Airport quite a lot as part of my job as a senator. And I can tell you, Terminal 1 is choked to the brim. You're lucky to get parking. You have to book weeks in advance.
So what do you want to say? Leave the cap as it is in Dublin and move the business down to Shannon and Cork? Do you think the demand is there?
I don't think the case has been proven in relation to having to lift the cap. And what is missing is an adult in the room in terms of government, because what we should have is government policy with joined-up thinking about utilising Shannon, Cork and Kerry airports rather than sending 88% of our flights. Currently, 88% of our flights all leave from Dublin. How can that be good for our economy? How can that be good for our environment? You have people travelling from Limerick on buses every day, I see them, and in cars up to Dublin Airport when they should be able to access flights from Shannon and Cork and Kerry.
Oh, and that seems logical.
This is what I'm talking about. All these other bits of froth have got attached to an issue which is about the M50 and its capacity for serving Dublin Airport. The reality is the business won't go to Shannon. 3 routes went to Manchester instead this year. The airport, Aer Lingus have parked the St. Patrick and the St. Munchin in Manchester, basing them there. They could quite happily to base more aircraft there.
So the airlines, you're saying, don't want to go to Shannon, they don't want to go to Cork, they don't want to go to Kerry, they want to be in Dublin?
Business case, but it isn't competing with Dublin. Dublin is competing with Amsterdam and Brussels and Manchester.
It's
not competing with Shannon.
Owen's incorrect there. Shannon is actually competing directly with Dublin. This is part of the madness. On an island this small, we have Shannon Airport pitting competition directly against Dublin and Cork. What we need is joined-up thinking, a strategy based on an all-island policy in terms of aviation that promotes the west of Ireland. We shouldn't be the poor relation in the west of Ireland.
But Owen, you're saying they won't come.
Let me sum up what Shannon's problem is. It doesn't have a home strong population base. The way it has a lot of traffic for a city of 170,000 and Galway close by. It doesn't have the 1 million people and 1.5 million that Dublin has. So its traffic is necessarily balanced towards inbound traffic, mainly from America, for 70% inbound, 30% outbound. Airlines don't make commercial decisions on that.
And that's
its disadvantage. It does
actually only 44% of the people who land in Dublin Airport live in Dublin. And interestingly, I have a press release here in front of me from Dublin Airport, from DAA, boasting about how there are 32 county airports, how 1 in 10 of their customers comes from Munster. Now, how does that make sense? How does it make sense from an environmental point of view or from a customer point of view?
You have 300 routes compared to 28 routes.
What we need is a government to actually promote these airports properly as part of a joined-up thinking. That's what's been missing all these years.
Is that not a fair point? If 1 in 10 of people going to Dublin Airport are coming from Munster, why not just put more flights in Cork?
They're going because of frequencies. They're going because of choice.
But increase the frequency in Cork.
They're going because there is no choice. People don't want to get in buses.
You will never get 300 routes coming from Shannon.
But you could get more, is what I think Paul's saying.
Of course we could get more.
And Shannon is working on that, and Cork is doing a little bit more on that. And
yes,
right,
the government isn't working on it.
Let me return to emissions, by the way. I've just come back from the IATA conference in Dubai. I would challenge anyone to find an industry more concerned about emissions than the aviation industry. They purchase fuel. They'd love to get hydrogen into aircraft. You can't do that safely. That'll solve the whole problem when it happens.
OK, what percentage of flights going out of Ireland are using sustainable fuel?
You can't get sustainable fuel. You cannot buy it. You actually
because it's too expensive. OK,
no, it's not because it's expensive, it's not available. And that's really important. If all the aviation fuel, sustainable aviation fuel...
But there is an EU plan. There is an EU plan to introduce sustainable fuels.
OK, Saif, you wanted to come in?
Well, even when we start producing sustainable aviation fuel, and it is under research and it will come about, we will not be able to produce enough sustainably to meet the demand. And that's the critical point here, that there is simply not enough land available to produce the amount of fuel that is required to meet current projected demand. And the second point I wanted to make, and Owen probably knows about this better than anybody, is that it's the airlines themselves that are really calling the shots here. They decide where they want to go. In the Dáil some months ago, the Taoiseach then, Leo Varadkar, actually made it clear that he would like to divert some of the flights to Limerick and Shannon and make use of those airports, but it's not possible to do so.
Okay,
so
the airlines have too much power here, Owen?
No, the airlines will go where the market is. If the market is there in Shannon and Cork, they will not go there when a politician tells them to do that. And on the, what's your solution, Sive, to aviation's emissions? Is it to close aviation down or decarbonise it? The industry is going to spend 150 billion a year trying to achieve
Okay, don't speak over each other because nobody can hear.
And it needs the support of politicians
Okay, let's dive back
to
in.
do that. They're not supporting it. They're all talk, no action.
Whenever you propose limits, people think you're closing an industry down, and that's obviously not the case. Nobody is proposing to close Dublin Airport down or any of the other airports. The issue is the cap, and the cap represents a limit on the amount of, obviously, land-based traffic that the airport can handle. That can be debated in planning terms, but there's a wider issue about how airport capacity can actually induce demand. In other words, create more travel than was otherwise going to be the case under a business-as-usual scenario. The reality is that Dublin Airport's own annual reports are suggesting that their emissions, just their operational emissions at the airport, are increasing over the last couple of years. And they too have targets to get to net zero.
Right,
how are they going to do that?
Sorry, Sive, just want to give the final word to Paul here.
I think we need to remember that airlines have a key role to play here. When Ryanair makes 1.3 billion in profits, then we need to see
They
them
lost
work
2
with
billion
us.
during the pandemic.
Yes, 11 or 13
You
years they've
stop
been
growth
profitable.
in Dublin Airport, you stop growth in the economy.
Absolute
it's
nonsense.
as simple as that.
That's a blinkered
And we're
view
one
in
of
terms
only
of the West of Ireland.
three airports in Europe.
We're
that
going to
are
have to
putting in
leave
this
that
cap.
conversation there for now. My thanks to all of my guests and to you at home for watching. That's it from our programme. See you tomorrow night.